Welcome to the Life on Springs Goal Kickstarter Mini E-Course. I'm your presenter, Kibibi Springs, and today we're going to cover Part 1, Setting Up for Success. At Life on Springs, our mission is all about inspiring actions of optimal health and thriving, and we cater to those who are most committed to creating the best life possible for themselves. People who realize that the journey of life is ideally long and that it gets better with every consistent and newly adopted habit that it helps improve their overall health and well-being. In Part 1, we're going to show you how to design a winning personal change process. We're also going to talk about the reality checklist that needs to be faced before you design that plan, and how to play the long game of habit change success. I'll do a quick wrap-up and then give you a sneak peek of Parts 2 and 3 of this mini e-course, and then share some additional resources if you'd like to do some additional learning on your own. When you're designing a winning personal change process, you really have to take responsibility for all areas of the process, including the self-reflection. If you're the type of person that moves towards the areas of your life that really feel uncomfortable, that's an indicator that there's an opportunity for you to change. And while change is definitely a constant and it's not necessarily everyone's best friend, even those who choose it for themselves find themselves in some kind of middle passageway, questioning why they even started pursuing the goal. At that point, some of you turn back, some just stop, and some go all the way through. So there's a few things that you need to face up about change. One is that personal change is personal, meaning it's extremely unique and personal to you and your preferences and willingness and desire. So you have to be willing to accept what you don't want to change and to focus on the things that will work for you more consistently. The next thing is that all change brings its challenges. So when you're formalizing your commitment to this process, you need to be prepared for a little adversity. The other thing is that you must be very patient with the process. You must be willing to do something specific for a consistent amount of time to actually reach that goal. So if you're tired of the start and stop process of your change, then this mini e-course is going to be very helpful for you to learn some of the fundamentals to set up your own personal change process. In her book, Change Power, counseling professional and author Meg Sillick, she states that the first time around, only 20% of habit changers actually make it through all the stages of change, which leaves about 80% of us habit changers experiencing a lapse or a relapse or just giving up. But the good news is that even if you relapse, you're still more likely to achieve the habit change goal within 6 months than someone who hasn't tried at all. So good for you for even being willing to try. Next, let's talk about that reality checklist, or getting real with yourself. So when we get real, we really face our predispositions. We acknowledge what's easy for us, what's challenging, and what's not likely to change. And we tend to negotiate on those that are critical, and then sometimes we go a few rounds with the resistant ones, and then eventually we settle or resign to go forward. And going forward usually starts with knowing your specific and desirable goals. They should be clear enough for you to taste. In other words, you should really be able to visualize them and try them on for size and see how they feel on you. Next is to have a specific and desirable plan to achieve them. So you want to get those visions on a solid foundation to build from by creating a very achievable plan. Next thing is we want you to focus only on what you're willing to do to achieve the goal. You know what you're not willing to do, but for this process, focusing on what you're only willing to do is going to get you there. Your won'ts aren't going to create action, but your wills will do that. You need to anticipate those roadblocks and make a solid plan B. You have to be real enough with yourself to know what your kryptonite is, what typically derails you, and create a hack for it. For example, I personally experimented with several soda alternatives to find the perfect fizzy, not too sweet, overly sugary combination that made me feel like I was having a soda. Next, you want to be willing to get prepared and create new systems. So preparation is the first leg of any marathon of success, which is going to mean revamping existing systems and creating new ones. That's going to be covered in great detail in Part 2. Enlist a supportive team. Life is not a solo sport, and neither is habit change. So enlist someone who cares about you to support your journey. We're going to cover more of that in Part 3. Create an effective reward system, one that will be set in the middle bar. Don't set your goal system too low for your rewards, and don't set them too high either. We want you to enjoy receiving the benefits of your hard work along the way. And finally, invest in additional help where it's needed. We all need a little help sometimes, so whether that help is something that you need to pay for or to enlist a friend or a family member in, that is perfectly acceptable and actually preferred. So when it comes to playing the long game, this is where commitment comes in. You have to really be committed to the process. There's a Japanese business system called Kaizen, which really focuses on the continuous improvement of working practices and personal efficiency. And I think it's the perfect philosophy to apply to personal change. It really supports also the research that advocates for goals that are learning based versus performance based, that they tend to create greater success. So, in the beginning of any new quest or stretch goal, there's a learning curve that must be accounted for before your performance picks up speed. So, in the early stage of any goal attainment, it's best to focus on discovering what works and mastering the processes that continue to perform versus focusing on performance outcomes. In other words, if you want to run that half marathon, focus on form, breathing technique, and just making it to the end of your block without passing out. After you do that for a number of weeks, you'll get a little closer to that 26-mile stretch that you're pressuring yourself to run in that first week. Break it down in baby steps. While we seem to live in an increasingly more instant world, the best things still really do require some time and patience. So remember that life is not best paced at a sprint. A steady jog with an occasional scenic walk followed by a long, slow stretch is really ideal when it comes to long-term habit change. And honestly, the more you enjoy the process, the change will happen when you really stop freaking out about it. That covers the setup for part one. We hope that you learn something from designing to your preferences and creating plans that work for you. And remember to focus not on your friend's plan, your coworkers, or your family, but the plan that is most uniquely fit to your tolerances and willingness, because you're the person who's going to have to follow through. Next, we want you to definitely get real with yourself, take that checklist out, and make sure you've answered all those questions for yourself to the most specific possible way that you can. The first time around, you want to find a low fence that you can hurdle successfully to create some more confidence for you to start leaping those tall buildings. And then the last thing is, be sure to settle in for the long game, and that's more of a mental plan. You want to be very vigilant with your patience and quick to rebound from your missteps. Perfection is not the best plan for habit change. Perseverance is. That's what wins the war. In the next two sections, you're going to learn how to play the long game a little bit more, which is going to break down those specifics about habit change and how to create your own successful habit change system. And in part three, we're going to cover the sustainability and accountability plan that makes those systems stick where others tend to fall off and fail. I hope that you learned something during this presentation, and here's some additional learning that we think would be very interesting for you. Thank you for attending. We hope that you'll keep thriving. I hope that you'll tune in for parts 2 and 3. And whenever it comes to your habit change, just remember to make it easy. Easy, effective, sustainable, and enjoyable actions. That's the way to simplify and sustain habit change. Thank you for joining us.